can barely hear. I mean, I can hear it, but it's like very quiet. Try that.
One, two, check, 1, 2.
Are you done?
Huh?
Finish.
No, I'm still enjoying. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. While I'm checking, I'm gonna eat my ice cream. It's so good. It's huckleberry sauce from Montana. Oh man, I don't like it. Probably my favorite. What I do, I take the raw huckleberries and I cook them down in a pot. I add a bunch of sugar, continue to cook it, let it cool. Then I put it in jars. And when I put it in the jars, I then...
Okay. I think this is it right here, yeah.
I wasn't finished giving my huckleberry ice cream recipe.
My biggest advice will be for when you have kids is let them cry it out to go to sleep. And then let them cry it out early, and then that way, when they're this age, you just sit with them for a few minutes, and then you say, okay, good night, and you shut the little door, and then they lay in there and talk, and
They
then
do
go.
what they want, and then until they get tired and go to sleep.
And then they'll eventually fall asleep.
Okay.
Yep. I'm a very, very sensitive person, so everyone's like, oh, you'll never be able to let your kid cry it out. I'm also old and heck of tired, so please believe I let my son cry it out.
Instead of stopping this.
Right, I'll like, he'll figure it out. You know, everybody in this house needs to sleep, so good night.
Want to do something for sink?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Just leave it there, I'll wash it off.
Okay. I hear audio.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, let's do this.
You're like in the corner.
I'm
She's gonna sit on my lap soon.
Okay. I don't know. Can't even hear you now.
Really? Are we still live?
Yep. Okay, now you're all in front.
I am in the frame or I'm not.
You are.
We're all in the front now. You can have this go. You're good there.
Okay. Oh, that's cute.
Check. So, can you hear me or not hear me?
I can hear.
Everything's great? I mean, like on the microphone?
I thought I heard you on my phone there.
Okay. And, as long as it gets recorded on the...
Where did that little thing come from? Is that yours?
Mm-hmm.
You are too much all the time.
Are we good?
I think so.
All good?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright, starting at 8:37 and marked. Alright, I hope this is going to work out. Did you try the ice cream?
I did not.
You did not try the ice cream.
I'm gonna eat my ice cream while you're
Okay,
talking.
wow, yeah. To let people know
We're
that
allowed
that's...
to eat during Bible study, right?
Yeah. Alright. So anybody else have a plan? Because I don't.
No, just along for the ride.
I'm eating ice cream.
Okay. Let's just open in prayer. Father God, we just come to you today and we just thank you for this time of fellowship and friendship and just coming together and learning a miracle of Jesus, Father, that gives us a message. And we just ask you to allow the Holy Spirit to guide us this evening. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen.
All right. So today we're going to be talking. Have you tried it yet?
It's good.
It's really good. You
It's
like
really
it?
delicious.
Okay, good. That's a family recipe.
From the hills of
From the hills of Montana.
Mm.
Montana.
It's a
Huckleberry
huckleberry ice cream compote.
Mm.
So, okay, today we're going to be talking about the book of John, but particularly John chapter 5, verses 1 through 18, and this is the miracle of Jesus. So can we turn our Bibles to John chapter 5, verses 1 through 18.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have it up on your phone? Do you want me to hold your ice cream while you look for it on your phone?
No, I can get it.
Okay. Okay, so John chapter 5, verses 1 through 18. And when we all get there, I'll read it aloud, and then we'll just kind of, as we're reading, just kind of listen to the story and just kind of maybe mentally note.
I need to look it up on my phone because I can't see
Those
what
are
the
really
Bible
tiny.
says.
John chapter 5, yeah.
I need a large print Bible.
So,
Fun fact.
one page more. Should be, there's two. I think there's one page. Oh, there's 5, yeah. Cool. So, are we all there?
Everyone. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John 5.
John chapter 5, verses 1 through 18.
Okay, I'm there.
Alright, and you have the chat up there too?
Yeah, I'm getting the chat working.
Okay, cool. So if anybody's watching and hearing, they could just kind of interject here, and Hav will read the question or the comment. This is not, you don't just have to enter questions, you can enter what you're thinking about it or ideas that pop into your head. It's just a open discussion. Okay. While he's getting on that, I'll start by reading. Okay. And I'm using the NIV version, the New International Version. So, okay. Some time later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem near the Sheep Gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus says to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had made him well. So, because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. And in his defense, Jesus said to them, "My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working." For this reason, they tried all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. All right. So I just want to kind of start off, I guess, this Bible study with just if there's any, from reading this, from hearing this being read, if there was, what are some things that maybe jump out to you? Or anything that kind of like goes, like either is like doesn't make sense, or maybe like, oh, that's really interesting, or that's cool, or that's, or I don't like that, or whatever. Something that jumps out to you.
I would say when Jesus said, "You are well again, stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you."
All right.
Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Did he keep sinning?
We're gonna get there.
Okay.
That's okay. That's a good thing to think
That
about.
was the exact part that I was stuck on too.
Yeah.
My other question is, right after that verse it says the man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who made him well.
Yeah.
How did he know that? Because the
that's
verse
a
right
good
before
question.
that, it just says, later Jesus found him at the temple. Instead, it said to him, blah-de-da-de-da-de, but it doesn't say, is it assumed that they had a conversation about who Jesus was?
That's a really good point. Yeah. I mean,
How did he figure that out?
Yeah. the way I kind of look at that part, we're gonna get there too. But what jumped out for me at that part was like Jesus just told him, was like, hey, stop sinning or something worse is gonna happen to you, which we'll get in a minute. But then he was like, then the guy was like, okay, and then he like turned around and went to go like snitch on Jesus. You know what I mean? So it was like, what? I don't know. We'll get there in a second. Okay, so like I have these awesome little Bible study guide books called Take Up Your Mat, and it talks about the 7 different miracles through the Gospel of John. And this book is actually titled after this particular miracle. And so there's some things. So yeah, so Hav, do you have anything that you want to reflect on from hearing this story? Anything that jumped out to you, or?
I guess what jumped out is that when he tried to make his way, there was always someone else that had to be first.
Yeah.
And they didn't try. The person that wanted to be first knew that he'd been there for a long time, but didn't want to help him. And they couldn't have waited like the next time the pool shimmered for the hill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, wait, I have another thought.
Okay.
When it says the man who was healed had no idea who it was, in verse, is that I can't read, 13, where Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting that Jesus healed him but didn't want like accolades for it. He just healed him and then slipped away quietly without like making a big production of, oh, I just healed this man, look at what I did, like I'm this like great and powerful healer.
Yeah.
He just slipped away quietly and nobody even knew who he was or what he had done.
Yeah, I like it. That's a good point. I'm gonna get to that too in a second. Okay, so I want to like begin with this facilitator's guide here that was actually written by the professor of this class. No, he wrote this was written by the editor, the facilitator's guide, and he wrote the actual the actual account of the miracles and commentary on that. So facilitator guide was written by the editors. And there are some good questions in here that I think are really important. So I want to begin with this one. This is just, you don't have to answer this out loud. You can just answer this in your own head, just something to think about as we kind of dive deeper into this passage. So reflect silently on, have you ever been discouraged by something that you have suffered with for a long period of time? Also, has there been a time when you came close to giving up hope due to specific circumstances? I also want to have you reflect on, has there ever been a time when you needed help but didn't know where to turn? Has there ever been a time when you needed help but no one knew how to help you? And then, has there ever been a time when you needed help but those you asked refused to help you? So there's some good considerations. I can raise my hand to all of those and have multiple stories personally on all of those accounts. I'm sure a lot of us can. Let's take a look at this verse. I read a Bible commentary. I think it was Blue Letter, a commentary that offered some good insight about this story too. So let's see here. The things that I kind of discovered is like in verse 7. So the guy, as you said, it says, I have no one to help me into the pool when this water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. I think that we see like a classic example of hope and hopelessness put together. So like the guy still has hope that this water's going to help him, but he's hopeless that he's gonna make it. And so, but it's like he's little hope to make it into the pool. And I think that's really interesting because I think there's a lot of things in our lives today that we experience. We have hope that something's going to happen, but it actually going through is we have it's like we're hopeless for it. I think it's interesting too that it limits God. Like there was a part of this commentary I read about this particular verse was that the guy limits God's help to his own ideas. Now, John Calvin said that, a theologian, where it says the guy is pretty much saying, I have no one to help me, no one to, so he's pretty much limiting God's power by saying that to Jesus, which is really interesting. Do we have any other thoughts about this particular thing? Where like you like think about this guy being like invalid, like meaning paralyzed, and this pool. Maybe I should like talk about this pool first. This pool was like, it was, a lot of people believe that if you were to go in this pool when the waters were stirred, that you were to be healed. And so there, a lot of people were like waiting around this pool, waiting for it to stir, and then they would go in the pool.
Imagine the feeling of him sitting there on the edge of the pool and constantly trying to get in, and everyone going ahead of him and not being able to get there. Imagine the feelings of like anger and frustration, or even like a jealousy and bitterness that he had to have been feeling. But what could he do about it, right? Because he can, I mean, but then I also wonder if it was me and I was that desperate, please believe I would have flopped myself over and rolled into the pool. And it just makes me wonder, like,
Yeah.
what was going through his head?
Yeah.
You know, what was he thinking? And
Yeah.
did he try as hard as he could? Was there a pecking order? Like, how did that work?
Yeah. Because it says here that he's been invalid, paralyzed for 38 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole time he's just been sitting there by the pool.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
How's your lifestyle?
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions about what's going on around this pool.
It says here in the verse 3, here a great number of disabled people would lie here, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed.
But then what does that also say about the other people, that not a single other person
Tried to help.
right,
Yeah.
saw that he had been sitting there waiting, and
Yeah.
that everyone kept cutting in front of him, and not a single other person took pity on him to help him?
Yeah.
What does that say about the people around him?
It also is really interesting that, like, because it says a great number of people, like, why did Jesus show up and just help him?
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah.
that brings up a point that Julie just said. She
Yeah.
said that the living water came to him.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Julie from church?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my
Wow.
Good
goodness.
job, Julie.
Say hi, Julie.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Julie. That's deep. Yeah. I think she's reading a Bible commentary right now, too. No, that's cool. Yeah, no, that's right. Like, the living water came to him to heal him.
But that makes me think that his heart wasn't, he hadn't turned bitter and angry towards all of the people that didn't give him the opportunity, and that's why he was chosen. Because I
Yeah.
feel like if he had turned into some like bitter, hateful person because of all of the waiting that he had to do and not ever getting the opportunity, I don't think that he would have been helped. I think that
Yeah.
he was rewarded for still being a good person and not
Yeah.
turning bitter and angry.
I think it's also really interesting at the beginning, too, that Jesus asks him, do you want to get well?
Right? Well, duh. Who wouldn't? Who would say-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that makes me curious. Like, what was the point of that question?
Yeah. I think, in my opinion, I think if I were to think about that, like, I think that Jesus is not just going to come through and just heal you, heal you, heal you, heal you.
Yeah. I think
He's
it's
going to ask,
intentional.
like, do you want to be healed
Mm-hmm.
spiritually and physically? Do you want it? You know? But what's also interesting is, like, the guy's response to that was, I have no one to help me. I have no one. So he's like,
He never says yes or no.
he never says yes or no. And then Jesus says, get up, pick up your mat, and walk.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and what I think is cool is it's like an immediate healing.
Mhm.
Like, it's like not like, okay, put your big toe in it for like 10 minutes.
Right.
Take a sip of this water.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was just like, all Jesus had to say is just get up. Like, and that's pretty cool. So like pretty much Jesus like challenges him to do like what is humanly impossible.
Mhm.
And he was able to pick up his mat and carry it and then walk, and he was just paralyzed for 38 years. So I think that's pretty interesting. Do we have any thoughts about that part where Jesus says, get up, pick up your mat and walk? And then once the man was cured, he picked up his mat and walked.
So, and maybe we'll get into this later, but I'm curious about why he told him to pick up his mat and walk when he knew it was forbidden on the Sabbath to do that.
Yeah.
I feel like that was an intentional move, and I wonder why.
Yeah.
He knew it was forbidden, and he knew that it was going to cause issue, but he still told him to. He intentionally told him, pick up your mat and walk.
Yeah. So that's what leads us into the next verse. I'm sorry, I didn't leave time for everybody else.
That calls attention to the man,
Mhm.
and then Jesus like slowly went into the crowd and like disappeared.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that's like another point of like, later on, it's like,
honestly. It's like, I'm gonna slip right on out.
yeah. I think that's kind of like Jesus' plan. Like, all right, I helped this guy. Now everybody sees that I helped this guy, or like everybody sees this guy like healed. I'm gonna dip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to.
I'm out here.
I'm out here. Like I'm not. Do you have any thoughts about when Jesus told him to get up and pick up your mat and walk? Like once he was cured.
Well, like you said, it wasn't after 38 years of laying there and being ignored. He was instantly made well.
Like
and,
recognized, huh? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's cool.
And he was just told, you're not laying here anymore. Get out of here. Get up. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's
You
Yeah.
go.
can stretch.
Yeah, go stretch.
Yeah.
His legs were sore.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
They're
Like,
like,
Maybe they
atrophy.
weren't. Maybe
You
Yeah.
think he would have like a
Maybe.
little bit of atrophy for not moving around for
Like-
38
like
years?
baby deer
y'all.
syndrome?
Uh-huh.
Probably so. I do like that. Like, maybe I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but it seems like every time Jesus gives a commandment, it is every time. It's not like doesn't seem. It's like Jesus is like saying, "Go" or "Follow me" or "Get." Jesus is not like, "Hey, do you want to get up?"
Yeah.
He's like, "How you feeling, big guy?"
Right.
He's like, it's like commandment.
Pick up your
it's
mat
like,
and walk.
yo, you pick up your mat and walk. It's a demand, and that's awesome. So I think that leads us into the next part with like, on this day which took this place of the Sabbath is a whole Sabbath issue. So it's interesting that the leaders ignore the whole miracle because they say it is the Sabbath, the law forbids you to carry your mat.
Mm-hmm.
So for being there for 38 years, I would reckon that this guy was like known by the Jewish leaders around there.
Yeah.
They probably knew him, and then all of a sudden he gets up and takes his mat to walk, and they're like, "Hey, you're not supposed to take up your mat to walk." Like they don't care that he was healed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They focus on like the broken law
Mm-hmm.
of it, which is very. It's like, I don't know, like if I saw something performed and it broke a law and it was a miraculous event, I wouldn't be like, "Hey, wait a second," I wouldn't be concerned about the law.
I'm like, how did you get healed?
Yeah,
How-
that
how
would
are
be
you walking?
that would be like the number one question.
Yeah.
Like, how'd you get healed?
Were you
How-
faking all this time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last 38 years, you were just playing us.
So, it said, and then from there he says, "The man who made me well said to pick up your mat and walk." So again, the leaders do not care who healed him. They just want to know who told him to break the law. Which is very interesting.
What was the penalty for breaking the law? Do we know?
At this time, yes, it was willful. Was if it was a willful breaking of the Sabbath laws, then you could be cut off from the church and stoned to death.
Mm.
For carrying your mat on the Sabbath?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to use that with Marcia the next time she asks us to do something at church we don't want to do.
She's probably
Hi,
right.
Marcia.
Hi, Pastor Marcia. Ixnay on the.
No, you know I was there. Terrific.
I know you would. Let's see. I wonder if she's joining in. Does it say she's joined, Pastor Marcia? No?
I cannot tell.
You cannot
I see
tell.
who's here, but I don't see Pastor Marshall.
Okay. Okay, so let's see. Let's go. So then I want to kind of go further and look and so we know that the Jewish leaders are more concerned about who told them to break the law. Because from what I understand, that someone who persuades you to break the law was like a worse offender than the person to break the law. Back then, it was like a.
So like how they represent you.
Yeah, that's a whole other
That's a
story.
whole.
That's
It's
a
a
whole.
rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a deeper rabbit hole. Whew. We have 40 minutes, and that takes another 4 hours. So then, yeah, we talked about that too. That Jesus didn't want recognition, like acknowledgement yet. So like he avoided the attention.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see here. Let's kind of go into Yeah, let's go into this verse, the one that was kind of like the main question at the beginning. Here, it's very interesting. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, okay, so he had already, Jesus disappeared, right? But then Jesus, so it says, later Jesus found him at the temple. So that tells me that Jesus made it a point to go find him, right? It doesn't say like Jesus bumped into him.
No.
So it says, see, you are well again. So Jesus points out to him like, hey, you are well, which kind of gives the connotation of like, you don't just put a Band-Aid on it, like you are cured. And then stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. What does that mean in your eyes, Ange? Stop sinning and or something worse may happen to you.
I mean, it sounds so threatening.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like if
It
you
really sounds like ominous, like stop sinning or you're going to be in deep trouble.
step on that path, you're gonna break your back.
Yeah. So Jesus is saying, stop sinning, something worse may happen to you. So pretty much something worse
Something
than...
worse than being paralyzed, which is what? Death?
What about carrying his mat on the Sabbath? Like, are they gonna stone him?
And if
Good point.
Jesus
That's
knew
not
he
a
was
sin,
a
though.
sinner, then why did he heal him in the first place?
What do you think about that one, Hoff? Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. Jesus telling him that.
Well, I think it's, you know, he, after he got healed,
Yeah.
he went off and did all the things of 38 years of things he didn't get to do, and he just picked like the first top of his list, and Jesus already knew what he was up to. And so he went to him and told him, stop sinning, because I know what you're doing. I healed you. Why are you, there it goes, why are you
Doing these
already
things.
turning from me?
Yeah.
I healed you. I gave you the water.
Yeah.
And now you poured it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
That is-
I was like, wow, you hit the nail on the head with that one.
Are you Googling these answers?
No, I was checking the audio.
Good job, honey.
So pretty much from what we learned from the story and what we learned from these Take Up Your Mat books and different commentaries and stuff is Jesus was more referencing the life of sin being worse than being crippled for 38 years. Like the life of living separate from God, because that would lead to death, spiritual death. But it reads as like, stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. As you were saying, it's like a punishment. Like, you know, you sin, so God punishes you with being paralyzed, which was a very big thing back then. People thought this, and we're gonna continue on.
I
with this
wonder
now.
if other translations say it the same way in that verse.
Yeah.
Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you, because I feel like it's the way that the NIV translation is that makes it sound like that. I'm
Maybe.
wondering.
Maybe we can look up some different. Wonder what the King James says about it.
Let me,
You
I don't
can
know
change.
how to change it on this thing. How do I change it on the Bible app? Honey, do you know how to change it on this thing? Oh, there we go. I found it.
Yeah, it's in the upper right corner.
Yeah, let's go to the King James and see what King James says on. That would be John 5:17. I'm sorry, negative. John 5:14. Something worse may happen to you. Yeah, when I first read that, I was like, man, if I like cut someone off, or if I yell at someone on the freeway and use a bad word or something, am I gonna like my leg gonna get cut off? Like, yeah. I started thinking about it.
I don't even understand what this is saying. What verse is it?
Okay, John 5:14.
So 14 in the King James. This is so hard to read. Now I know why we don't use this version. Afterward Jesus findeth him in the temple, and said unto him, Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee.
Lest a worse thing come unto thee. Something
I
worse
mean,
may happen
I
to
feel
you.
like that does change the
It does a little-
implication of the
yeah.
verse, though. It doesn't sound quite as threatening
Right.
as something bad's gonna happen to you. I mean, it's still
Yeah.
kind of a dark, seeing something hanging over his head, it just doesn't sound as neat, I think.
Right. Right. Yeah. So Jesus in this verse here, when he says something worse may happen to you, he's concerned for the guy's spiritual wellness. It's not like it is. It is like living separate from God, and because that leads us to death. So. Let's actually, I want to answer this. I want to stay on this. Let's turn to John 9, 1 through 5. Should just do a couple pages. While we're doing that, do we have any questions or any input from the live feed? As our future Pastor Julie.
Nothing else yet.
Nothing yet.
Wait,
Okay.
can I go back to that other verse just for a second? I looked in the Message version.
Yeah.
And it says, this one's so much happier sounding. A little later, Jesus found him in the temple and said, "You look wonderful, you are well," with exclamation points. Don't return to a sinning life or something worse might happen. So, but it's with the exclamations and like you look wonderful, you're well. That sounds so inviting.
And I think that it's kind of interesting the message would say that at the beginning, because this is stop sinning, and it's don't return to a sinning life.
Don't return to a sinning life.
So that almost gives
Correct.
the implication of don't live in sin, or
Well, and that Jesus knew what kind of, it feels like in this version that Jesus knew what a sinful life he had before or something, because it's saying don't return to a sinful life.
right.
Right?
But this also points out too that Jesus still picked him
Mm-hmm.
in the pool.
Possibly knowing that he was a sinner, but still chose him and healed him for a reason.
For a reason.
Maybe because he wanted him to believe in miracles. Okay, what verse were we supposed to be going to?
Okay, let's stay on this and let's go to John chapter 9, verse 1 through 5.
Okay. Wait, let me get out of this Message version.
John chapter 9, verse 1 through 5.
This is not online.
Do you want to read it?
No.
I need to read part of it. Ange, why don't you read it?
Okay.
Just this one.
As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happens so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world."
That's the end. Yeah, so let's look at the beginning part there. Which, like, okay, could you imagine? So, like, this is the same, like, kind of. So this kind of answers that question of, like, stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. Because then the disciples so they're walking with Jesus, right? And they saw a blind man. And then his disciples say, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" So they think at this time that because this guy is blind, either he sinned or his mommy and daddy sinned.
Mhm.
And that's why he's punished for being blind. So the disciples are asking Jesus, like, "Hey, Jesus, who sinned, him or his parents?" And then Jesus says, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned." That doesn't mean like this man or his parents are perfect. They're not like, free
But
from
they're
sin.
saying, but he's saying that their sin, no sin caused that.
Yeah.
Him to be blind.
Right, and that's this verse here, I think, answers or strengthens what he said. Stop sinning, and or something worse may happen to you. That's what I'm thinking on that. So that's just a little side piece thing that was I really liked. So then it goes into the authority of Jesus. So this whole story is Jesus establishing his authority, right? Like this is what this means. So it says, so because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, all right, so we're still concerned with breaking the law. The Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, Jesus said to them, "My Father is always at work to this very day, and I too am working." What do you think about that statement? What do you guys think about this? Just Jesus saying that my Father is always at his work, and to this very day I too am working.
So, even though it is the Sabbath, his healings and blessings don't stop.
Yeah. Are you Googling?
I'm looking at us.
Man, yeah.
For the inspiration.
Yeah. Like answering all the right answers, I think. At least I think.
Good job, honey.
Good
Good
job.
job.
All right. Yeah, pretty much. So, well, like, if we put ourselves in the context of the people at this time, right? They're Jewish, and they have an understanding of, like, the Sabbath, right? So in Genesis, it talks about God creating the world in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh, right? Rested on the Sabbath and on the final day. So a lot of the interpretation of that is, okay, man needs to rest on the Sabbath, meaning you can't do anything. I read a story recently. I think in the past maybe 5-10 years, there was a fire in New York, and the landlord did not call the fire department of this apartment complex that was caught on fire because he didn't. This was like in 2021 or 22. That by using the phone on the Sabbath, he was a practicing Jewish gentleman, and by using the phone on the Sabbath is like considered work because you're breaking that electrical current or something like that. It had something to do with like that was violating the Sabbath. So he was like, I can't call the fire department because it goes against my religion. Like, it goes against what God tells us to rest on the Sabbath. The interpretation of that. So 3 apartment complexes burned before he was like, okay, I'm going to call. And it was like, he could have called, but
Oh my word.
that's it. And so, like, at this time, and that was just a couple years ago, but at this time in ancient Israel, is that, you didn't do anything on the Sabbath. It was a day of rest. So breaking that, it says here, would a willful breaking that would you be cut off and stoned. So here Jesus is saying, my Father is always at work to this very day, and I too am working. So like exactly what Javier said is, it kind of challenges what the Jewish leaders have always thought. It says, hey, like, God. Blessings and God's work is still happening on the Sabbath, and which I think is pretty cool because Jesus stands up for himself. And then it says here, for this reason they tried all the more to kill him, because then Jesus doesn't just say God, he says my Father, and the way he says my Father, it made it like if Javier was my dad, I'd be like, oh, my dad, because it made him like equal. And then Jesus said like my dad is always at work, and I too am working. So now it makes me equal. Mm-hmm. And so then Jesus just not only like did he solidify his relationship with God as a personal father-son relationship, but he also solidified his relationship as an equal. And so that like is like a double whammy in the Jewish faith of like blasphemy and stuff. And so like he at that time too, Jesus, by saying that, Jesus made God a participant in the ordering of breaking his law. So now you're like saying God made it. Yeah.
Wasn't me.
Yeah. Do we have any thoughts about that part there?
I think that it's I guess like funny that he just is so much like he doesn't care about how do I say it? It's not that he doesn't care about who he upsets, but again with his intentionality, he's so intentional with what he says and how he says things, and it's almost like he's doing and saying things intentionally to stir the pot. But he's okay with that. And that's what he wants to do. It's like he's intentionally wording things in a certain way to get people to yeah. And be like, look, I don't care what you think about me, this is how it is, like it or not, so this is what we're gonna do. I just think his word choice is always interesting.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about it?
No.
Do you have any thoughts about it?
No.
I want to go back to talking about the verse of John 9.
Verse of John 9. Let's see. At once the man was cured. Oh, the verse of John 9?
Yeah, I want to talk about the blind guy.
The blind guy? Alright, what do you want to talk about that one?
Okay, my first question is, why did the disciples care? Why are they so nosy? Who's scared? Who's scared? Who's scared? Are they, what difference, I mean, I'm being funny, but at the same time, what difference would it make?
Yeah,
What difference does it make?
I think the disciples are, in my just own thought, I think the disciples are like trying to clarify what Jesus said. Because I wonder, it doesn't say like disciples were with Jesus when he told this guy to stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. But I almost think that, it doesn't say that they were or they weren't, but I feel like that they had it in their head, like, because like the Gospels are riddled with the disciples like just being confused.
I
I'm like Jesus,
understandably,
yeah.
because dude walks around talking in riddles all the time. He
Right.
never answers a question. He's like,
Yeah.
well, let me tell you a story.
Yeah.
It's confusing.
And so, even though it says that like it doesn't say anything about disciples being there when Jesus found the guy in the temple, it just in my head maybe like one or two of them were there, you know, or maybe they all were there. I don't know, like, but I feel like that was just like one of the things they were like trying to clarify, like okay, like we just saw something, we're kind of confused, something worse may happen to you. All right, you know, and then they're walking, they see a blind guy, and they're like, Jesus, all right, hey. Who sinned? Like who? What do you mean? Like who? Why is this guy punished?
So it's kind of like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah,
trying
exactly.
to figure out like, okay, we had this example before, so let's see if the reason we get behind this one kind of lines up with that. So they're trying to figure stuff out.
That's what.
I mean, I guess that makes sense,
Yeah.
right? But then I think what's confusing about them asking that question is that, and maybe we like figure this out later, but I don't think so in the New Testament here, is that I thought like it's known that you enter the world not as a sinner. Well, no, that's not true because everyone sins, but has the baby sin? Like what could the baby sin be in the womb?
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel very confused about this.
Well, this book, Take Up Your Mat, actually, we're not really talking about it, but it does go into restoring the blind beggar and talks about the John chapter 9.
I think what's bothering me more is I'm wondering, because I'm reading too deep into it, I'm wondering if it was a common thing at the time, I think, for people to think that a child or a baby could have sinned that would have caused them to have a certain disability.
Yeah.
I think that's where I'm going with it, and that is bothering me. That is just like the misconception, because I believe even in, you know, like 30s, 40s, 50s in our time, that people believed that, you know, if your parents had you out of wedlock and you were born with certain disabilities or whatever, so that was a very common misbelief, and so I just wonder where that came from, and I'm wondering if it started for a reason.
Yeah. As I went forward and read about this real quickly about about John chapter 9 miracle, it points out here, it actually talks about the John chapter 5 thing too that we're talking about. So it says John rejects, the Gospel of John, rejects the assumption that just because Jesus performs a miracle, people will automatically place their trust in Jesus. In fact, John is showing quite the opposite. He makes it clear that trusting in Jesus requires much more than cognitive assent. Trusting Jesus takes much more than proof of his identity. After reading in John 5, what we're talking about right now, one might think that all of Jesus' accusers needed was an example of a different kind of healing on the Sabbath, one where Jesus does not have someone carry their mat. Perhaps Jesus could perform a miracle in which all there is to consider is a wonderful gift of healing. Surely that would show Jesus' accusers how they would have been missing the point. Surely that would have convinced them that Jesus is a fulfillment of the very law they're accusing him of breaking. But the miracle of John 9 does all of this. It gives those who were opposed to Jesus all the proof they needed, and yet they only made them more adamantly resistant to Jesus and his mission. So it says John is not suggesting that it's a predetermined that all certain people will trust that Jesus is who he says he is, and certain people will remain opposed. No, what John is suggesting is when people place their sense of security in things that have nothing to do with Jesus and his mission, it becomes very difficult to give those things up and follow him. So it talks a little bit about John, but it doesn't really like answer the question, huh?
I mean, even when Jesus, because later on in the story of the blind man, he heals him.
Right.
He spits on the ground, makes mud with his saliva, and then heals his eyes. And then neighbors don't even go. Then neighbors, I don't feel like they moved around a whole lot back then. Like I don't think they just packed up their donkeys and moved to another hut in the next village over. I think they pretty much stayed where they were. They didn't even believe it was the same man. They literally say to each other, "No, it just looks like that guy. It's not him." What?
Yeah. Yeah, because the blind beggar one talks more about that he restored the blind man's sight also on the Sabbath. So it talks about that.
Which again, I find funny that he's just like, YOLO, I do what I want when I want.
Yeah.
Just tell me now. It's just I'm gonna walk around and do whatever I want, and I don't care who I make mad.
Right.
Interesting.
It is really
Again,
interesting.
very intentional.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Let's see, where were we at? John, so do we have any other thoughts about my Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working?
No. Wrap that up nicely.
We wrap that up. That's so
Little bow.
Yeah, that was very good.
Yeah. So let's see. So we did when we did this in class. We did a few questions and had to submit them and whatnot too. Let's see. How do we actually? We kind of covered that. I just want to make sure that we're covering a lot of different things. Let's see. Oh, I do want to share this. This is really interesting that I learned from this book. That's pretty cool. And this was a part of like an assignment that I filled in. It says it's like a play on words the author of John wrote. So we discovered that John uses the Greek word P-O-I-E-O. I don't know. To detail that Jesus can do what God does, right? So like in the previous sentences, he uses the same word to detail that Jesus can make what God can make. So I wrote this. I have to say that so I'm not plagiarizing myself, which is a big thing these days. You can plagiarize yourself. So I wrote this as part of assignment from earlier in this course. So yeah, but and what I did is actually I did a Google Translate on it, and it's the word for do and make is the same word. So what did I write? I said John uses the Greek word to detail that Jesus can do what God does, but in the previous sentence he uses the word to detail that Jesus can make what God can make. And then after I looked at that in the Greek, and then I looked at it in the Hebrew, and it also translates to do and make. So here's John saying, what is it saying? What is the authority of God in 5? Let's see. That's when, let's see. I think it even goes into, so because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him, and his eventually said, my Father always works on this very day, and I am too working. For this reason, I try to one of the Okay, so this actually goes a little bit further into verses 19, and where Jesus is telling the Jewish leaders, very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. For the Father loves, and the Son shows him all he does. Yes, he will show him the greater works than these, so that you will be amazed. For just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, even so the Son gives them life, whom he is pleased to give it. Moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son, that all may honor Jesus as the Son, Jesus just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. And but he uses the word make and does, and it's the same word, which is an alliteration that John uses. So that's just kind of like a little side note that I thought was kind of interesting. I don't know if it made any sense whatsoever, but I like those little what are those word plays. They're fun. Yeah. We already talked about how that might be interpreted. Yeah. So as we kind of end this and wrap this study up, because we're coming up on the 60-minute mark here pretty shortly, let's conclude with just a few questions here. And we can. I want to say these verbally, right? So these aren't just reflective in your mind. These are verbal. You can take a few minutes, but the first question is, what did you learn from this story about Jesus? And the second question is, what can we take away from this message? So let's just start off with the first one first. What did you learn from the story about Jesus? And people that are in the live chat, how many are there? How many have been paying attention?
Julie and Joe.
Julie and Joe, sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Julie and Joe.
All right. I like it. And this goes out to them as well and everybody here. What did you learn from the story about Jesus? And we'll start with you if you're ready.
I mean, I feel like because what I picked up on all along was just how intentional Jesus was about everything that he did and said, and I feel like his actions are always intentional, and I feel like when I say there's a motive behind it, I don't mean that in a bad way, I don't mean a bad motive. I feel like because he was always working, he's always teaching, and I'm reading really far into this, but because I'm somebody who, kind of like you, who never thinks before they act, and I just do and say whatever comes to my mind and my brain, I feel like even something as simple as that we can all learn from it. I know that wasn't the point of the lesson, but the fact that he's so intentional in choosing his words and so intentional in choosing his actions is something that really speaks to me, because that's something I'm not good at.
Yeah.
That's something he's really good at, but I'm not, and so even just the way that he goes through this, and not what he did was a small action, but the way he went through every step of this interaction that took place and how it was intentional, and every little thing that he did was lined up in a way so that it played out the way he wanted it to.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said for thinking more intentionally and acting more intentionally in order to get your point across.
Yeah. And that's what you can take away. That's answering the second part of that question, right? What can you take away from this message? So you answered both questions.
I did.
Okay,
I did.
Good. All right. Yeah. All right. What do you think?
Mine would probably be never give up hope, because that man waited, 38 years to be helped, and he was kind of getting, it seems, a little hopeless and a little frustrated, but then Jesus came through and saved his life.
Yeah. I like that. What do you think, Bob?
I think when you said that what Jesus says, what God makes, I can make.
Yeah.
So if God wanted to, just this blind guy, or anybody, for example, the guy that we had to deal with on Monday, right, or the thing that happened at the church. If God wanted to change this guy's life, this may have been the thing that changed his life. So coming to our church and the incident that happened, without going into all kinds of details, but maybe this is the thing that was put in front of him to change his life. So God made him choose a better outcome because God presented that outcome to him.
Yeah.
Instead of him just running off and going off and doing his thing, he came back and he was able to own up to what happened, and now he may have more of a chance to redeem himself.
Yeah.
So even though what happened wasn't a good thing, it turned into something better because God made a choice better for him, an option for him.
Yeah. I like that.
Maybe
Okay.
because he, what was made for him will make his life better later.
Yeah.
And God provided that. So.
Yeah, God provides, right? Yeah. That's cool. Julie, are you still on there? Or Joe? I'm going to ask you guys now if anybody wants to hop in on the chat. What did you learn from this story about Jesus? And what can we take away from his message? And I'll give you maybe 30 seconds. And if you don't respond, then we'll move on.
It's going to take us time for that to catch up.
Okay. Oh, yeah, because we're delayed, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
How did you announce to people? Like, did you post it on Facebook or something?
I just posted on Facebook.
Okay.
And then I also, Pastor Marcia sent out an email this morning.
Oh.
Yeah,
look at
an
you.
all-church email.
Ooh,
So.
an all-church email.
So let's see what Julie has here.
Okay.
I see it as he puts more faith in the actual water, the guy that's been there for 38 years. While being helpless, the Lord sees us and knows our struggles. He puts the strength and grace to heal us. We just have to accept that. His hand is out, and we just have to reach out and embrace him.
Nice.
Wow, Julie. All right. Well, that's pretty good.
The chat is so Gen Z.
Is that what Julie said?
Hilarious.
Awesome. Joe, did you want to add on to that? What did you learn from this story about Jesus, and what can we take away from this message, from his message? Maybe give it a few seconds here to let the video catch up. Okay. All right. Well, I'd like to conclude this with, and if he pops up, interrupt me, please, so we can talk more about it. But I want to read this one more time now that we have further insight and we kind of just dove into it. And with the stuff that we talked about today, I kind of want just keep that in mind as I read this one more time. And we have this new insight, we have these new thoughts, and we have these new feelings about our own lives and stuff. And just kind of, I'm going to read it a little slower. Just take time to kind of maybe put yourself in the story, maybe as a disciple, or maybe put yourself in the story maybe as the man, the invalid man. Maybe put yourself in the story as being one of the crowd members that were just onlooking. Maybe put yourself in the story as a Pharisee, the Jewish leader, or
I'm a fly on the wall.
or a fly on the wall. Yeah. Either way, just put yourself in maybe as a character in the story, and just think about it as I read this a little slower. That goes for y'all on Zoom. No, it's YouTube or
It's
the chat,
the website.
the website.
Yes.
Oh yeah, the church
You
site.
can
Okay,
just say the site.
the site. All right, here we go. The healing at the pool. John 5:1-18. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was the Sabbath, and so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick up your mat and walk? Pick it up and walk." The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had made him well. So because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, Jesus said to them, "My Father is always at work to this very day, and I too am working." For this reason, they tried all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God.
Joe has a question.
Yeah.
Is this the only time Jesus encounters again someone who he worked a miracle on, and is it okay to do God's work on the Sabbath?
I absolutely think it's okay to do God's work on the Sabbath. I think that's good to do God's work on every day. And then the first part of the question was, say that again?
Is this the only time Jesus encounters again someone who he worked a miracle on?
Man, I don't know. Like found him later?
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting
That's a really
question.
interesting question, yeah.
Does Joe know the answer, or is he testing us?
Yeah, it's Joe testing us.
Are you testing us, Joe?
Yeah.
Do you know the answer?
I-
What do you think about that, Joe?
Yeah. Like performs a miracle and sees him later.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
How much time do we think passes? Because, I mean, were they at the temple all day? They were at the temple all day, right?
Probably, yeah.
I mean,
It's
they
a
weren't doing
festival,
nothing
so
else.
yeah.
They weren't allowed to do nothing else, so all
Right.
they could do is sit at the temple, right?
Yeah.
So, I wonder how much time passed between when it happened and then when Jesus saw him later at the temple. Like, are we talking 30 minutes, or are we talking 6 hours, or are we talking, like, what are we talking?
Yeah. That's a good point. I don't know. I don't,
That's a good question.
that's a
I
good
don't
question.
know. I wouldn't.
Yeah. And that's what's cool about, like, you know, this Bible studies is like it just opens up to questions that, like, I don't think we really know, you know.
I mean, it literally just says, later Jesus found him at the temple and said to him,
Yeah. What's later?
right, how
Yeah.
much later?
Yeah.
I don't know that it makes a big difference. I mean, if it's an hour or 6 hours, but I think it's be interesting in the span of time just to show what, back to Joe's question, you know, how many people were there, how often are we running into these same people?
Yeah, I think that. I also think too that it's interesting to think about too, like Mary Magdalene, like when Jesus healed her, right, and then she like, wasn't there like a time where she like kind of fell, and then like Jesus like was like kind of went to go get her, like hey, like she
She said back in the barn.
back in the show Chosen.
Did you just say in the bar?
Yeah, she was back in the bar of the TV show Chosen. Like,
Oh.
yeah.
I was like, wait, what's
Have
happening
you
right
seen-
Back in the
now?
barn.
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, I
You
see.
haven't seen the show?
Oh, I
No,
see,
we
yeah.
don't watch much TV in this house unless it's Mickey Mouse Clubhouse with Libby.
I think a possible answer, because most of the time when he does a miracle, if I'm understanding or I mean I could be wrong, just like he did the first time, he disappeared into the crowd,
Yeah.
right? And there were other times where people were starting to get mad at him, and he just disappears into the crowd. It could be that this was the only time that he went back and found the person that he healed, but also, if you think about it, there's, because all these little because the parable thing that we study on with Chris and Stacy, it
Yeah,
all
our Bible study is on the parables, the ones that we're doing right now.
Oh, okay.
it ties into like the 99, that type of thing. Like that person is lost, but he will always go back and get them, even though it may not have been recorded, or even right now, like there's people that are lost and he'll always go back and get them. So
Yeah.
I guess you could say yes, even though it's not recorded. We just don't know.
Yeah. Like, Jesus always comes and finds us.
Mm-hmm.
Or we find him.
Well, I also feel like it could be debated though, because we're interpreting it as later Jesus found him at the temple and said to him. We're interpreting it as Jesus went to look for him. But if it's all these people just milling around in the temple, right, all day doing nothing, yeah, you're going to bump into the same people. I mean, I was just on a cruise ship with 2,000 people, and I saw the same people every day because you're just walking around and you bump into the same people in the elevator every couple of hours.
And then you could also turn around and say, oh, hey, I found so-and-so earlier.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think that's also up to interpretation of did Jesus, I mean, that could be a debate, right? Did Jesus seek him out intentionally to tell him, hey, by the way, stop acting like a Denny? Or did Jesus organically just bump into him and then was like, while I'm here, let me just drop this little nugget on you, stop sinning, right? Like, I mean, I think that could be up for interpretation too. What was really going on there?
But then, by saying that, is that also saying that, like, it's a coincidence?
I don't know. I don't
Because-
So,
know.
like, how much time went by for just to be like, hey, I seen what you did in that hour.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying.
You
Like,
got a beer and you did something else. We're not mentioning.
They were Catholic. They must have been Catholic, not Jewish, because Catholic people drink at their festivals. I've been to them.
But yeah, I mean, these are all like really good insights. But I like what he asked about. I think we should. I think that Jesus demonstrated it perfectly. Like, you can do God's work on the Sabbath, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I think, we're constantly doing God's work because God is constantly working on us. Wow, that was like the most profound thing I've probably ever said in my life.
Good job.
I gotta write that down somewhere.
Well, it's recorded. You can go back and get it
Alright,
later.
I already forgot what I said. Do we have any closing thoughts at all?
Stop sinning
Yeah,
or
stop
something
sinning.
worse is gonna
That's
happen
what
to
I
you.
do.
Right? Stop sinning or something real bad's gonna happen.
Break my ankle.
It sounds dark.
Yeah.
Julie says everything Jesus does is intentional and has purpose.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's why I agree. Is like, because if you say that like they just kind of bumped into each other at like the Walmart, or the Jewish festival, it's like
Same difference, I guess.
it's almost like implying that wasn't Jesus' plan. It was like just a coincidence. So I think I would agree with Julie and say that like Jesus sought him out.
Yeah.
Was like, where are you at? There he is. Like I could just picture Jesus like standing on like maybe like a stone pathway. Like, where's this guy at?
Looking for him.
Where's
Looking
this
for
guy
him.
at? He was wearing a red. He was wearing a brown coverall.
I think they were all wearing brown. I don't
Yeah.
think they had a lot of color back then.
Yeah.
How did it smell?
I know. That's what I was thinking. When
Gross.
they're all laying by the pool.
Ew.
But yeah.
So Joe says the word found implies a search.
What?
The
Yeah.
word found implies a search.
It's very true.
So
Found does imply search, yeah. Yeah. There's 6 other miracles in this book that's like
Mhm.
we could sit here and talk about deeply, like this too.
Not tonight. I'm tired.
Do we have any other closing thoughts from the chat or Javier or Christina or Angela?
No. I already gave my closing thought. I'm gonna stop sinning because something bad's gonna happen if I don't stop sinning.
It has to be separated from God and live a life of death. All right. Well, let's close.
I guess if you want to thank our audience. And,
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you,
for
audience.
thanks for everybody joining in.
Thank you, Julie and Joe.
And whoever else.
Whoever else watches, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Oh, yeah, because this is
whoever
going to be live forever. So let's let's
Forever.
close in prayer. So, Father God, we just thank you for this time to come together and learn about this miracle, God, and just dive more into it. We thank you for giving us the pathway to discern and reflect on our own lives. And we just ask you to continue help us walk in you, Father, and just continue on shining your light on us and